Hello everyone, I'm John, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the most terrifying things that have happened in real life. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.
I'm not sure whether this makes me fortunate or unfortunate, but the most horrifying thing I've ever seen is completely imaginary. I was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic at 14, although I first started showing early signs at 7. I hallucinate constantly, both visually and audibly, and the actions of my visual hallucinations can cause me pain. I'd assume they can cause pleasant feelings from touch as well, but I've yet to experience that. The entire manifestation of my disease seems to be attempting to make me as miserable as possible and is almost like another entity in my head. That being said, most of my visual hallucinations are human-like figures, entirely black, lacking any real defining features. They don't resemble anyone I know, as far as I can tell. They do, however, seem to enjoy making me as uncomfortable as possible by just leering endlessly. They're always there. Usually just watching me. It feels like I'm being criticized constantly for every movement and every action. It's made me incredibly self-conscious over the years. Anyway, I was sitting in my room at the age of 15. It was late at night, and my family had been asleep for hours. Suddenly I heard a loud thud behind me. I'd been hallucinating for a couple years at this point and didn't think anything of it, assuming it was another fake bump in the night. Then I felt a hand over my mouth and a swift, sharp, agonizing pain in my ribs. To this day, I still consider it the most painful thing I've ever felt. The feeling of the hand left my face, and my head collapsed onto my laptop. I grabbed my side, which felt warm and wet. I saw a shadow slip out my bedroom door as my vision became blurry and the room started to spin, and for a full 20 minutes, I could not move. I was in too much pain, my body was going into shock. I managed to peek down at my side, and it appeared I was bleeding heavily. I could feel the blood running down my body and hear it dripping onto the carpet. My mind was racing with thoughts of my family being murdered. I heard my dogs barking wildly, unable to get to the intruder as we'd installed a door at the end of the hallway to the back of the house so the cats could have some peace from them. My heart pounded louder than I could deal with. I heard screaming about how much of a failure I was, how I was a complete idiot, and that it was all my fault that my family had been killed. Tears rolled down my face, and finally I let out a scream of some sort. A few moments later, my sister opened my door, turned on the light, and the nightmare vanished. The pain in my ribs dulled significantly but still burned. I lifted my head from my keyboard, and the pool of blood below me was gone. I pulled my hands from my side, and they were suddenly clean and dry. My sister looked at me with a worried expression, asking what was wrong and wondering why I was bawling and screaming at 2 a.m. I sobbed even harder, and all I could offer as an explanation was, "I'm just insane." That was the night I realized I would have to deal with this for the rest of my life. That I would experience traumas and stresses that never existed for the rest of my life. That I would question the motive and intention of every single person, relative or stranger, for the rest of my life. But hey, at least in the end, most of my fears and worries end up being made up. Mine wasn't so much seeing something as experiencing it. When I was 11, my dad committed suicide, and I had absolutely no way of properly handling the situation. When I was told the news, I didn't even react. I just sat there quietly because my brain couldn't comprehend the idea that the man who was my best friend had decided to leave me behind. I made up all of these excuses in my head about what had really happened, the most realistic being that he had faked his own death and was just trying to get away from everything. Even his funeral didn't mean too much to me, as he was cremated, so it fell into my story of him still being alive. It took me about 3 to 4 years to really understand everything, meaning that it clicked in my head. I started to notice all of the weird details that I hadn't realized when I was younger. Things like the time that I came downstairs and he was just sobbing for no reason, or the looks of devastation he would have on his face from time to time, despite our family having fun at an amusement park. His suicide note topped it off, as I wasn't told that he had written one until around that time. He talked about how me and my sister were his world and that he wished he could stay around and see us grow up, but the world was just too much for him. I learned that he was extremely bipolar, and that's why he would have those fits of rage followed by sadness that I had just deemed his personality. I ended up becoming extremely fearful that I would end up like he did, and I am honestly still scared every time I get angry or sad. It wasn't something that was immediate, or something that you could see and quickly look away from. It was a realization that my best friend was so mentally ill that he could not stand to keep himself alive. And that's the scariest thing I could ever possibly imagine. I was taking my dog, a yellow lab, for a walk with my dad when I was maybe 8 years old. We just started to head back to the house, and about halfway there, a bear appeared in the middle of the street. The bear was standing on its hind legs, standing about 12 feet tall, looking angry as all hell. My dad put me behind his back upon noticing the cub on the side of the road because he knew this bear wasn't fucking around if it thought its cub was in danger. Next thing I knew, my dog charged at the bear full speed and tackled it down the hill off the side of the road, and me and my dad both thought that that was the end of our dog until about a minute later we saw our dog strolling up the hill without a scratch on her. She wrestled a bear all the way down the hill, won, and most likely saved mine and my dad's lives. Damn, I love that dog. I caught a methed out young woman rummaging through tools in my dad's garage. The face she gave me when she realized a larger male had confronted her in a confined space was one of pure terror, and she was ready to claw my eyes out to survive what she most likely perceived as a threat. When she turned to run out of the garage, my police officer dad caught her by the arm and held her down until the police arrived. Watching her fight, beg, and plead that we won't rape her or kidnap her was pretty heartbreaking when we had the best intentions in mind of getting professionals to handle her drug-infused meltdown. The struggle was strong enough that we decided we should handcuff her to keep her from hurting herself or us. Come to find out later, she was on the run and being chased by police because she thought she was being chased and in danger of being kidnapped inside a hotel. We were her worst nightmare in her mind, and it sure as hell looked like it. When I was around 15 years old, I lived with my Vietnam vet dad on a pretty busy street in East Louisiana. Car crashes were fairly common. You hear a screech and crunch, then you get the cordless phone. This was 1995, and some towels, walk outside, make sure everyone is okay, and call 911. Most of the time, the people were shaken up, but okay. You help direct traffic and keep everyone calm until the cops arrive. Well, one day we hear a screech, then a thud, not a crunch. That means that someone, not something, got hit. We look outside, and there's a woman on the road about 20 feet from the crosswalk. At the other end of the crosswalk was a tipped-over baby carriage with an infant on the pavement. This one was going to be bad. Me and my dad did the routine. Grab the phone and the towels. I never knew what the towels were for, but my dad told me that day in the most direct military way I've ever heard him speak. Grab 2 towels. I'll cover the 2 bodies. We run outside. The infant is crying. I never felt so relieved to hear a baby cry. An older woman picks up the baby from the gutter. My dad starts on her about moving injured people, but she saw the accident go down. The woman was crossing the street pushing the baby carriage when she saw the car coming, pushed the stroller towards the curb, and took the full force of the car. The stroller rolled to the curb and tipped the baby onto the asphalt. We didn't know if the baby was 100% okay to be picked up, but we had another person to look at. The woman is alive but beaten up pretty badly. She was missing teeth and bleeding from her mouth. Her knees and shins were scraped up so badly that we could see bones. Her arm looked broken. She was aware and crying. My dad told her not to move and told all the bystanders not to move her. The whole time I'm on the phone with 911, he's relaying information that he's telling me. Her boyfriend shows up. He's a fully tatted gang member, crying like a baby, shoving people aside to get to his girlfriend. My dad stops him, but instead of saying you can't, he says hold her left hand. The guy drops to his knees and holds her hand until an ambulance arrives. We didn't need to use the towels that day. We got word later on that she had a broken arm and shoulder, but she and the baby were going to be fine. Later on in life, I moved to an apartment right on Sunset Boulevard at the junction, and once again, car crashes became normal. I go through the motions that my dad taught me, but one morning a large pickup T-boned a sedan with 4 people making a left turn. I had to use my towels that day. I was one of the first people to roll up on a car crash that ended up killing 3 people. It was surreal. I was coming over a hill and didn't see the crash happen, but the dust was still settling. I pulled off and immediately ran down into the ditch, where one of the cars came to rest. Both of the folks in that car were okay, so I went back up to the road, where the driver and passenger of the second car were crawling out of the windows. They both looked to be about 16. When I got closer, I saw 2 girls lying in the road, one clearly DOA and the other gasping for air with a collapsed lung and multiple compound fractures. She was bleeding badly and was, by this point, surrounded by people trying to keep her awake until EMTs arrived to intubate her. All of that was really shocking, but the scariest part was the behavior of the young driver. I talked to him for a long time to try to keep him calm. The first 5 minutes we talked, he spoke like we had just met under normal circumstances. I asked his name and where he went to school, and he answered normally. Then, every once in a while, he began snapping back to reality for a few seconds. His eyes would change, and he would begin to panic, then snap right back out of it and resume making small talk like nothing ever happened. I've seen people in shock before, but never like that. My friends and I used to play by this creek. My cousin's house backed up to the woods, and the creek was about a mile deep behind their home. We played there pretty much every day during the summer. One thing we used to do was swing from one side to the other with a swing we made. One day we were swinging, and one of our buddies, Josh, slipped. It wasn't super uncommon to slip. You usually just fell in the creek, got wet, went home, and changed later. This time was different. Josh fell backwards and ended up hitting his head perfectly on these large rocks that were by the edge of the creek. The impact was so bad that he was bleeding profusely. My brother jumped in to make sure he didn't drown. I ended up running back to my aunt's house with one of my cousins and a friend. My brother, another cousin, and another friend stayed back. We got help, but it was too late by that point. It was just a freak accident. We fell so many times off that stupid swing, and nothing ever happened. He just fell wrong that day, and it ended his life. I could hear his parents' screams from my aunt's backyard when they got back there. It was awful. I still can't watch movies that involve kids dying, and as a dad now, I can't imagine letting your child out to play and then finding out they died. It has made me realize that life is short and accidents can happen anywhere, so it has actually made me less overprotective when it comes to my own kids. That experience changed me as a person. Note, this occurred in 1995. For the young ones out there, that was before cell phones were mainstream. I was 11, and we were all between the ages of 11 and 13, so we probably wouldn't have cell phones, even if they were big. Having a phone wouldn't have saved my friend, but I figured I should explain why we had to run a mile to get any help. I worked at a gas station when I was 18. One night, at the end of my shift, the graveyard guy just didn't show up. I called my sister to see if she would hang out with me until I could get a hold of someone. At about 4 a.m., an ambulance slowed down right in front of the station. As it came to a stop at the light, the back doors opened up, and a guy jumped out. One paramedic hopped out of the back, chasing after him. The guy ran right up to the station, looking terrified. He turned to the left to run again, and we noticed that his head was missing a big chunk in the back and that blood was all down his back. The medic continued to pursue him through the parking lot next door. We called 911 and explained the situation. Dispatch responded, "Yeah, right." About 20 minutes later, police arrived to take a statement from us. Guy was high and injured, trying to get away. I don't know if they ever caught up with him again. My mother giving my brother CPR on the beach after he broke his neck and almost drowned. He was in the water for about 4 minutes. Then watching the helicopter take him away, not knowing if he was dead or alive. He defied the odds and went on to live another 36 productive years as a quadriplegic. I was with him when he died a few years ago. Damn, we had some good times. Edit, to answer a few questions, he was body surfing at Rehoboth Beach in 1980. There was a major storm or hurricane some miles offshore, which can cause waves to carry one further and break on the shore. He was basically pounded into the sand headfirst. He went on to graduate from high school, college, and some law school. Eventually, I went into social work and advocacy. Was able to work until about 40. Lived until 52. He broke the same vertebrae as Christopher Reeves but was able to breathe on his own. The doctors told us not to expect him to live past his 20s. I saw a 5-year-old girl fall about 30 feet from a chairlift while skiing. When she landed, I was about 15 feet away. She landed on her stomach. I called ski patrol immediately, but the time it took them to get there felt like an eternity. It was probably not more than 5 minutes. I had no medical training other than very basic do not move the injured person. Since her face was directly in the snow, I took my jacket off, held her neck and head still, and had a nearby person slide my jacket under her face. It was shortly after Christmas, so I tried to distract her by asking her what she got from Santa, and I sang her favorite Christmas song. I kept holding her neck still until ski patrol took over and sent her into the ambulance. Later, I found out that although she had some bad bruising, she walked out of the ER later that day. I saw a car crash as a child. My dad stopped the car to help. He made me stay in the car, but I saw one body on the ground that started to gain a puddle of blood around it and another body handing out a window of one of the cars involved in the accident. Blood, glass, and car chunks were everywhere. Horns were honking, and I heard a lot of screaming. My dad came walking back to the car shortly after he got out. I asked what happened. He said there was nothing he could do, pulled into a parking lot, and waited for cops to come. I remember being impressed by how fast the firefighters cleaned everything up. You would think seeing the bodies would stick with me, but what stuck with me was the pale, dead look on my dad's face when he came back to me. Sometimes your best intentions can't do anything, and I could tell it got to him. I saw a girl get chopped by a boat propeller from heel to neck. So I had just turned 22, and I was living in Austin at the time. Me and my friends decided to go out on Lake Travis for my birthday weekend, so naturally we went to the Strop Club a few days before to get some dancers and cocktail waitresses to come with us. So Saturday comes, and we're having a good time out on the lake drinking. Not the driver, he stayed sober the whole day, and one of the girls has had a little too much to drink, and she realizes she lost her phone. She starts to freak the fuck out over this, saying that we need to take her back to the bar we had lunch at or she's going to jump off the boat. We told her, don't worry about it, we'll go back, we'll find the phone, and if we don't, we'll all chip in and help her get a new one. Well, she's not getting it, and she starts trying to jump off the boat. We are able to restrain her and think we're in the clear. 5 minutes later, she just jumps off the front of the boat and takes one of the guys on the boat with her. Me and my best friend from high school, Nathan, knew it was going to be bad, and then we saw the water change color behind us to red. We both sobered up quick as hell. He jumped in and swam out to her. I threw out the life ring to pull them to us as fast as possible, and then I pulled her into the boat. Mind you, there are about 14 people total on this boat, and only 3 acted fast. The third was our driver, who, like I said, was stone sober the whole day. The girls were all freaking out because when I pulled her into the boat, you could see everything. Chunks of flesh that were eaten up by the propeller, exposed bone on her back. The makings went from her heel to her neck. The guy that she took over the front of the boat with her miraculously was untouched. The absolute worst part of it for me was that I knew we needed to apply pressure to these massive wounds. So as we made our way to the nearest place for paramedics to reach us, I sat on the back of the boat and kept solid pressure on her back. Now what made this so hard was her screaming. I still remember her begging me to let her go because I was hurting her, but I knew we had to slow the bleeding. I honestly don't know how long I had to hold her together, but it seemed to be forever. I was able to keep pressure applied the whole time. I honestly thought that she wouldn't make it, and I'm happy to tell you that she is alive and well. When we visited her in the hospital, the doctors said that if it were not for either one of the 3 of us who were able to keep cool heads under pressure, she would not have made it. So yeah, there was no worse birthday party than that day. I haven't been on a boat since. 3 years ago, a friend and I were driving back from downtown, just chatting away. He was driving, and I was in the passenger's seat. I noticed a large entity lying in the street near the local drive-in theater. From a distance, it looked like an animal of some sort, roadkill, maybe? As we got closer, the thing got bigger. As my friend drove by, we noticed it was a person. The man lying on the ground got up and stumbled towards us as we were slowing down to make a U-turn. As my friend turned his car around to go help the guy, we heard a loud thud. I looked to my right outside the passenger window, and there's blood smeared all over the window and mirror on my side of the vehicle. My friend stops the car immediately, and the man is banging on my window, begging for help. He's a large black man, and half of his jaw was missing. It looked like something straight out of The Walking Dead. He had been shot in the face and chest, and it was clear that only adrenaline was keeping him alive. My friend was terrified, so he froze up, but my adrenaline kicked in as well, and I just didn't care. I wanted to take action to save this guy's life. I immediately got out of the car to assist him. My friend thought I was nuts because I didn't know this guy, but I was jumping out of the car in a dangerous area to help him without giving a fuck about how drenched in his blood I was becoming. My friend dialed 911 as I tried to calm the man down to keep him from injuring himself further. I kept asking him to tell me what happened, but all he could say was, "Help me, please, I'm dying." I grabbed his hand and led the way as he stumbled to the curb with me. I sat with him as he laid himself back on the ground and tried to assure him that everything would be okay. I looked behind me towards the drive-in theater and noticed a pickup truck crashed into a telephone pole with the driver's side window blown out. We were on the border of the dangerous side of town, so I knew instantly what had happened. Police showed up and started questioning my friend and I while the paramedics arrived and took the man to the hospital. We were questioned from like 2 a.m. until about 6 a.m. Turns out someone shot the guy through his window as he was driving. It was determined that this was not a random act of violence, and the guy was someone else's target. They never discovered a motive for the shooting. The poor guy died of his injuries the next day. The worst part is that they never found his killer. I'll never forget the way his face looked, or the sound of his voice as he desperately tried to make out his cries for help with his jaw missing. I've been waiting to say this for some time. My father drowning. It was a couple summers ago in a local river. We were wading, catching a ton of catfish. The water was low, as it gets every summer, so it was very easy to get from one side of the water to the other. Catfish really like to stay in the holes, deeper parts when the water's low, and we had to walk around one particular hole in order to cast into it. Like I said, we were catching them left and right. After maybe 2 hours or so, we decided enough were on our stringers, attached to his belt loop and my belt. I had a bathing suit on, so I just had a belt loose around my waist, and my dad had the bright idea of swimming back across the hole instead of walking around in order to save time. Not his best idea. He is in front of me, and then he isn't. He comes back up repeatedly, saying that he dropped his pole. I'm like, okay, no big deal, it's a $60 rod, it's replaceable, right? Then it clicked. He was wearing jeans with lace-up boots, WTF? And I'm like, fuck, my dad's drowning. I just went into survival mode. But it was weird, I was in survival mode, not for my own safety but for his. I say fuck it and drop my pole, undo my belt, and make my way over to him, about 10 yards, and try to keep him above water. He's a bigger guy, too. Like 250. And it's just not working. Thank God the hole was maybe just under 10 feet deep, so I decide to go under. Again, that weird self-sacrifice survival mode kicks in, and I'm grabbing the back of his legs and pushing from the bottom for him to get air. I did that probably 6 times, but it wasn't getting us any closer to the edge of the hole. Fuck it, I'm just going to grab him by the collar and pull him along. This worked extremely well. Maybe 15 seconds later, we could touch the bottom. He is fucking exhausted, and I kind of am as well. Then he tells me that there is a hook in his leg with the line, from his dropped pole, wrapped around his legs. I try to feel for the line connected to the pole and connected to his leg. I can't seem to find it, so I squat down a bit to feel his legs for the line. It was the stringer, with catfish, around his legs. And the hook was a barb from one of the fish poking his leg. Catfish have really pokey bones in their fins. I untie it and say, fuck with those fish, goodbye. We made it to shore, finally, and just broke down crying. We layered there for probably an hour. It was the most horrifying experience of my life, but I didn't realize it until it was all over. I just couldn't believe how calm I was in the situation and how well I handled my father dying in front of me. The sounds he was making still kind of haunt me to this day, and it was hard watching him be so helpless. He threw up a considerable amount of water afterwards. It was the scariest 2 minutes of my life. The second plane hit the WTC, out my 35th floor office window, about half a mile away. The first one happened behind me, and I guess I didn't hear it, but then someone called me, and I was looking out the window at the smoke and the papers floating everywhere. I still thought it was some small plane accident, and I couldn't see the hole because it was on the other side. I was wondering if it was caught on video and picturing what the crash would look like in my head when the second one hit right in front of me, on the side facing me. It slid in like a coin into a slot, and after a moment, a ball of flame shot out in various directions, and a moment after that, my window shook. It looked just like I was picturing the first one in my head at that moment, and my mental gears turned for a full 10 seconds, wondering how my eyes just showed me what I was picturing. It wasn't until someone ran into my office asking what happened and I heard myself tell them that I realized it. I walked down 35 flights, walked miles home to Brooklyn, watched the second one fall on TV, then found my wife and toddler daughter at a gym class, and immersed myself in my daughter's world where this didn't happen.